My family invited me to Christmas Eve dinner just to publicly humiliate me and celebrate my brother landing a $324,000 CEO job. They had no idea that I spent the last decade secretly building a $6.7 billion global empire. I walked into that house wearing a faded coat, pretending to be a broken and naive girl just to see how cruel they would be when they thought I had nothing. What they did not realize was that the very company my brother was so proud to lead was actually a tiny subsidiary that I personally bought out 3 days prior. Growing up, I was always the forgotten child in our household. My parents poured every ounce of affection, financial support, and encouragement into my brother, Julian. When he went to an Ivy League university, they paid his tuition in full, while I worked 3 late-night jobs just to afford community college textbooks. They treated my quiet nature as a sign of weakness and failure. When I started my own technology and logistics business out of a tiny rented garage at 22, my family openly mocked my dreams. My mother told me to get a real job as a store cashier, and my father warned Julian never to loan me money because I was a lost cause. Because of their constant hostility, I decided to cut off financial talk completely. Over the next 12 years, while they assumed I was struggling to pay rent in a small apartment, my venture grew into a massive multinational conglomerate, valued at $6.7 billion. I kept my name entirely off the public board lists, operating through holding firms, because I wanted true peace and privacy. Then came the invitation for Christmas Eve dinner. My mother called me on a Tuesday morning with a voice dripping with fake sympathy. She said the family was gathering for a big celebration because Julian had just been appointed Chief Executive Officer of a prominent logistics subsidiary with a package of $324,000 a year. She made sure to emphasize that everyone would be wearing formal attire and suggested that I might want to stay in the kitchen if my clothes were too shabby for their high-class photos. I knew instantly that this was not a warm family reunion. It was a setup to parade Julian as the golden child and use me as the punching bag to make him look even grander. Instead of declining, I decided to attend. I wanted to see their true faces one last time and test how far human cruelty goes when someone is perceived as defenseless. On Christmas Eve, I put on an old faded jacket and walked up the front steps of my parents' mansion. The moment I stepped through the front door, my mother looked at my shoes with visible disgust, and my father barely offered a nod before bragging to the guests about Julian Zowry. Throughout dinner, Julian took every opportunity to throw subtle insults at me, asking if I needed leftover food boxes to take home and reminding everyone how hard it is for people without corporate talent to survive in the today economy. I sat quietly, taking in every insult and smiling weakly. Then Julian raised his glass for a toast and proudly announced that his ultimate goal for the upcoming quarter was to buy out small rival firms and establish complete control over the regional supply market. He looked directly at me and said that real leadership takes brains and power, something some people in this room will never understand. That was the exact moment my assistant sent a confirmation message to my phone. Just 72 hours before this dinner, my parent company had quietly finalized the acquisition of Julian entire corporation, making me the sole owner and ultimate authority over his entire executive board. I slowly pulled out my phone and placed a corporate document directly on the dinner table. Julian picked it up with a smirk that quickly turned into total horror as he read the controlling share release forms stamped with my legal name. The room fell into dead silence as I explained that his position, his high salary, and his entire company belonged directly to the girl he had been mocking all night. My parents sat frozen in disbelief as Julian's face went completely pale, realizing his entire career now rested in my hands. I stood up from the table, left the faded coat on the chair, and told them that true wealth is built on character and humility, not arrogant titles. I walked out into the cold night, leaving them to process the reality that the child they discarded was the very person holding their entire future. I realized that night that I no longer needed their approval because my success was my ultimate freedom.